Hello, welcome to the show by the Ethiopia Institute for Economic Justice. My name is Okoin Konocham. With me in the studio, two special guests. First, Nahum Tadesse, who is first generation Ethiopian American, born and raised in Utah. He is a recent graduate from the University of Utah, where he received a Bachelor of Science in Political Science and a Bachelor of Arts in International Studies. Nahum currently lives and works in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the government relations field, where his focus is on health policies. His passion and interest for Ethiopian politics began at a very young age and has cultivated in his participation in different advocacy groups in his free time. Now, welcome. The next guest is Mayor Omot Obang. Mayor is an executive director of the Ethiopia Institute for Economic Justice, and he currently lives in the United States, in the state of Texas. Mayor is a former, he's on sabbatical, but he's a former assistant professor of business and marketing at the University of Gambella, where he specialized also in microfinance, which he has done training communities to empower themselves. And this training, microfinance, took him as far as West African country of Guinea-Bissau. Mayor, welcome. So both of you gentlemen, welcome. Tonight, I would like to start with Nahum. Nahum, nearly 6 years ago, Ethiopia exploded with tsunami-like euphoria, which its tidal waves fell from as far as Sweden to Oslo, Norway. And the Ethiopian premier was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Ethiopians who were sick and tired of 27 years of EPRDF thought Ethiopia had finally overcome the authoritarian regime of the TPLF EPRDF. So they thought peace and democratic processes had finally prevailed. Is the feeling still the same today? Or was it a short-lived euphoria or a long-lasting one?
Awesome. Thank you for that question, Okoni, and I'm happy to be here tonight. To answer your question, I think we're long past the euphoria stage and how we felt when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed received the Nobel Peace Prize so many years ago. I think when he first came to power, we saw a wave in Ethiopian politics that inspired a lot of people. One that I have never personally seen before. I saw people like my father and aunts, uncles, grandparents who were excited to see someone who was young, vibrant, energetic, someone who seemed genuine and authentic, with good policies, and a good vision on where the country should go. Within his first few months of office, we saw him release hundreds of jailed journalists. We saw him increase women's participation in politics, specifically within his own cabinet. And we saw him sign a peace deal with Eritrea, which eventually gave him or was the pushing reason to giving him the Nobel Peace Prize when he received it. And I think we saw a lot of hope then that we have long lost. I think now, 2020 hindsight, we see that a lot of what he did in those beginning months and years were setting up something different, something, long term. Um, I would argue that he didn't create peace with Eritrea to create peace with Eritrea because that's the right thing to do. Rather, he did it to get an edge on his political opponents, TPLF. Um, whether you agree or disagree with his actions, that is a completely different conversation. But what we can acknowledge is that there are many things that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has done, and many of them, if not all of them, are inauthentic in what they are hoping to achieve. They may achieve those things, but the means for which he is doing them are twisted and are behind the scenes, things that we don't see. But I would argue that we've seen a deterioration in his support, as well as people's hopefulness of him being prime minister. You see, it started off with many Tigrayans once the war started in 2020, and how that affected those people in the north, as well as the rest of the country coming into it. We have, everyone was affected by that war. It has led to now conflict between Amara militia, Fano, and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Now we have issues in Oromia, we have issues in the west and east borders of Ethiopia, and to the south. There's just issues everywhere that have started to come up. And at the middle of it, I do not think Abiy Ahmed is a liked person. You see, he is being sort of the person that people point fingers at, and I would argue rightfully so. He has caused many of these issues, which could have been avoided through there are many different things that could have could have helped us avoid this. And I think transparency and authentic politics is one of them. When you're not lying or having ulterior motives to your actions, I think you truly see growth. You truly see peace. You see people wanting to come together. He talked about Madamar and like all these things in his speech. Yet those are things that we haven't seen come to fruition at all. So I think we're long past the euphoria of it all, and many of us are just hunkering down to see what happens next. And also, I forgot to mention at the beginning, but I am in no means a professional or expert when it comes to Ethiopian politics. Many of the things I'll say tonight are simply through my lens of how I have interpreted situations and issues that have arose in Ethiopia, and my point of view on how these things can be solved. So,
I mean, it's quite touchy because to someone like me, who came to the U.S. already older, and versus you was born here, and you have that desires for the country that you never been born in, never spent a year even in it. That's amazing, because you learn through your parents about what's happening in Ethiopia. What is Ethiopia all about? Probably you went there maybe once or twice or a few times. But here you are, you've been concerned, you've been involved in everything you can, humanitarian, voice, and whatnot. That is an amazing thing. So I don't think we can discount you not to be an expert.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Mayor, anything you would like to add?
Yes, first of all, I just want to say thank you a lot for giving us this opportunity tonight. It is a pleasure and a privilege having such kind of platform so that we can share our thoughts and we can talk about the current issues that are affecting our country, Ethiopia. So as now trying to mention earlier, Abiy Ahmed when he got the Nobel Peace Prize in Norway, is being welcomed by every Ethiopian, including non-Ethiopians, and people assume as if he is a messiah for Ethiopia because the words that he had spoken and the way that he approaches people and the way that he addressed the nations. Um, everybody, most of the people adores him because of the way that he trying to unite the states of Eritrea and resolving the conflict that has been here for decades. That was mind blowing for the world, and that's why it got recognition to be one of the best person ever in the world that could be recognized as person that could be given a Peace Nobel Prize. With that being said, after everything, things change upside down. It come opposite of what had been, advocated or what had been seen or what had been taking place. As a person from Ethiopia, like I was there and I was actually amazing in his book that he said Madamar, which is, a very nice thing that putting people together or becoming one as a group of people without uh, identification or without having a segregation, though we are divided based on ethnic groups, to have a respect for the differences or having a respect of diversity within the community. That would have been that was actually a lot. That was a relief, and it helped a lot at that moment. But now, as we can see, the war broke up between the Prosperity Party with the Tigrayan People Liberation Front. The Tigrayan people, they've been killed, and a lot of things that happened. And not only that, things shifted into different directions in a way that nobody's been expected it. And even in western part of Ethiopia, we could see a lot of things happening, like a place like Gambela and like Benishangul Gumuz. Not only that, now they are hunting and they are killing and they are targeting a people based on their ethnic identity. And not only the Pano people, the Pano military group that are they attacking, the innocent mothers and the children and everybody in Amara region is being targeted. For you being an Amara is a problem now.
Okay,
But
Mayor,
that
while
is,
you're in there, if you can
Mhm.
hold on to that before we go there, I think we might have a question that will come to that.
All right.
So what can you share with us while you're there? What can you share with about the current state of political, economic, and security affairs in the Gambela region?
When I come to Gambela, Gambela region is one of the marginalized region in Ethiopia. Um, before, during TPLF regime, um, it is one of the region that has been called, like in Amharic they call it Agar, or it's kind of supportive regions. So they are the four main regions, which is the regions that formulate the government. But there are others four regions that are supportive. They don't uh, they don't engage in the affairs of the government fully, but they are kind of member that kind of support. So Gambela was regarded like they said Anasa, which is something lower in Amharic, something little lower, and it has no value like that of Oromia or Amara region or Tigray or Southern Nation. So at that moment, the way that politics runs, the people that they put into the power, um, the way that they act, it is based on, it's not based on the intellect or based on how those people could serve the community. but based on how the person in leadership could benefit from that person. The people of Gambela, the indigens, for example, the indigens in those areas, they have no right to select their own leaders, but somebody would be nominated and would be given an authority to rule other people. So that was a kind of scenario that had been there for years, but nobody has been telling the truth about it. When you see the most of the leader, they weren't selected, or they weren't chosen, or what we call democracy, or in a way that people would choose their own people, because democracy is a rule by people, to the people, for the people. But if the people are not choosing their own leaders, if they have no power to select their own leaders, so it is going to be difficult to express. When we look at Ethiopian constitution, is written beautifully, and the way that it had been designed is really beautiful, and you would love it if you read it. But when we come to the applications, it's zero. Nothing. You don't see most of the thing being applicable based on the what has been written in the constitution in Ethiopia. So Gambela, it has been known with even though Gambela is rich in terms of natural resources, because it's the only place where you could go grow crops without using fertilizer. You don't need fertilizer to grow crops in Gambela. It is rich with minerals like gold. It is rich in terms of a lot of things. But the leadership, whenever the leadership in the central government, whenever they get into the power, the only means that they will look into is that how am I going to get something to benefit my, my colleagues or the people around the table. It's not everybody, because all in the leadership will not benefit from what they are getting, but the one in that leadership could find a way to benefit those around his table.
Okay, then currently, how is it the security then in particular?
The security in Gambela is worsening every single day. You could hear a lot of killing, and when I try to mention that, Gambela region is one of the widest. It has one of the widest border with South Sudan that cannot be controlled easily by any governmental troop. And in the border, there is no checking point, and there is no many places where the government troops or the National Defense Force could go and secure the region. There is a certain group of ethnic group from South Sudan that they cross the border every single year. They would cross the border, come abduct children, kill their mothers, kill their father, kill their family members, and take the cattle and take their children. And that ethnic's named Murle. They don't stay at home, but they stay in the bush, and they would come and abduct your children. But in all these cases, the only scenario, the only moment when Ethiopian government interfered was just once, and they didn't even bring back a lot of kids. So every year this thing is happening, but they got no plan to take care of the people. The function of the government, of the responsibility or duty of any government, is the safeguard of their community, the safety of the people. But there you will be killed and nobody's talk about it. And another thing is there is no social media or any broadcasting media that would report the things that is happening. On top of that, I'm going to talk about it later, the refugee things. The refugee thing is one of the problem, and I will touch that point later. But currently, Gambela is worsening. It is a state where you could hear gun fire every single day. You could hear killings and so many innocent people dying without interference of the government.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my next question goes to Nahum. Nahum, there is unconfirmed news about the state of growing insecurity in Ethiopia as a whole. like kidnapping, travelers for ransom, and summary execution. Just unprecedented insecurity situation in Ethiopia has never witnessed in its history. For instance, the Guardian newspaper just published a damning report about the alarming crime rates, and they specifically focused on the Oromia region, but I believe this is happening everywhere. So, as Mayor mentioned, some of this, the situation, the problems. So, what's happening in the Oromia region seem like a microcosms of what's happening across the country, or not? I don't know. We want to hear from you. What idea do you have, and why is this happening? Muted. Sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Like you mentioned, this is happening much further than just in the Oromia region. We're seeing it as well as like in the Amhara region. I was in Ethiopia last year, around this time actually, and there were many roads that we weren't able to travel on because of the fear of, having people carjack or rob you, or in the most serious cases, kill you. I think to answer why it's happening, I think we have the answer to that. And I think Mayor explained it very well when he was describing what the constitution in Ethiopia looks like. While it may be written good, and while there may be all these things that sound amazing, that we're not applying these what's in the actual document, as well as supporting our institutions that are supposed to uphold them. When you have weakened institutions, you see increases in crime. You see increases in people trying to sneak by and get, an extra head on someone else. You see corruption. You see rampant corruption, which I think is which attributes to this problem. People don't even trust going to the police officers or the cops who are supposed to be protecting them. These are people who would rather, take bribes for minimal issues or nothing at all. Yeah, stopping good people, and not doing anything to minimize or lessen these people who are taking advantage of a sort of vacuum that we see. And I think there's a lot that's happening around the country too, which adds to this and worsens it. So we see many of the institutions that are in place. Some may argue that they do work sometimes, and it's not this bad. We see all those institutions and all those groups of people, they're spread thin. There's so much that's happening in Ethiopia that there are these places that are siloed throughout the country that are sort of lawless and have just been left behind because they can't be on the forefront of everyone's attention, because if they are, then everything else which has been described as more important collapses. We have we've had the war that was going on in Tigray. We have issues in Amhara, Oromia. We have issues across our own borders in Ethiopia with Egypt, things coming up with Somalia, with Sudan, South Sudan. Like, there is only so much you can handle as a country. And it seems like all these fires have been put up, and now we're trying to do damage control to put them down. Advice on how it can be stopped. I think we've got to solve a lot of our issues that are taking our attention away from these things. And also acknowledge them as issues. I think many people just see it happening and go, that's the way of life. If you can't travel by roads, okay, let's just try to adapt. And while that may in the short term, be a good way to live, it's not long term. It's not in the long term. It's not something that can be maintained. If we want secure and if we want to be confident in the place that we live, we have to eventually answer these questions of how do we make our roads safer? How do we invest in these institutions that are supposed to uphold, law? How do we stop corruption? I'd argue corruption is one of the biggest factors that is holding Ethiopia back currently. So I think if we answer all these things, it sounds easier. It's easier said than done. These aren't easy things to solve. It requires a lot of overhauling of people who have been benefiting off of the misfortune of others. But it also requires trust from the public, the people who are supposed to be giving to the who are to be protected by the government. And I'll be honest, there's much reason for Ethiopians across the board to not trust the government, because many of them haven't been safe or have felt secure by anything the government has done in decades. It's been decades. So to ask for trust is in itself a very difficult task, and I think that is something that the government and the government should be looking towards, is how do we regain the trust of the people who we serve, who we support, and who we are supposed to look after. So if we can change the mindsets, if we can do that, and like I said, invest in these different institutions that are supposed to keep people safe, then we may be able to see a turning back. But yeah.
Okay, well, while you're there, the Guardian newspaper had published this. They did some. They collected some data from the Oromia region in particular. So if I can read a paragraph here, it says the gunmen came for Alamitu when she was sleeping. They marched her out of her home in Ethiopia's Oromo region and took her to a disused school in the countryside, where she was held hostage for 4 weeks. About 40 fighters were living at this school. Although hundreds of men passed through, Alamitu was pregnant. She was taken, said her captors beat her with the oars whip. On one occasion, she was tied up and suspended upside down from a tree for several hours, an ordeal that left deep psychological and physical scars. She was released only after her family paid a ransom of 110,000 birr, equivalent to 1,530 pounds. A huge sum in rural Ethiopia, which they raised by selling livestock and borrowing from friends. So when Alamitu was kidnapped, the family was already struggling to pay a 90,000 birr ransom for her uncle. Okay, a farmer who was held for 15 days in a separate abduction. So the family is now destitute. And I quote from Alamitu, "It is very rare to find a family in our area who has not been affected by kidnapping. The government is not in control." That's from Alamitu, according to the Guardian, not from you and I, right? So Alamitu identified her kidnappers as insurgents from the Oromo Liberation Army, OLA, a rebel group that has been fighting Ethiopia's government since 2018. The OLA styles itself as the champion of the Oromo, Ethiopia's largest ethnic group, who has claimed a long history of marginalization, but it has been accused of massacres and other abuses. So what do you think about this?